Most people wait for confidence before they move. The bold move and let confidence catch up. That's the difference. The brave prepare for the moment. The bold creates it. You've been trained to believe that bravery is enough. That feeling ready is the same as being ready. But it's not. Because the world doesn't reward potential. It rewards movement. Every dream begins as a risk someone finally decided to take. The difference between a wish and a world is one bold decision. The brave talk about what they'll do one day. The bold build the day. You don't need to be fearless to begin. You just need to stop worshiping hesitation. Because fear doesn't fade. It follows you until you turn around and use it. Boldness isn't loud. It's a movement in the middle of uncertainty. The ones who build don't always know how. They just stop waiting to be sure. You've spent years planning the leap. Now it's time to jump. You've been brave long enough. Now it's time to be bold. Because in the end, only those who move turn imagination into empire. Chapter 1. The difference between brave and bold. Bravery is the feeling before the leap. Boldness is the leap itself. The world confuses the two, because both carry the same heartbeat, the same shaking hands, the same trembling breath before movement. But only one building. Only one changes what exists. You see, bravery talks to itself. It dreams of the day it will move. It writes plans. It rehearses possibilities. It feels everything. And sometimes, it mistakes feeling deeply for living fully. Boldness doesn't wait for the perfect emotion. It acts in the middle of doubt, in the noise of uncertainty, in the weight of fear. That's the difference. Bravery is thought. Boldness is proof. Some people spend their entire lives being brave, talking about what they'll build, imagining what they'll start, waiting for a sign that never comes. But the bold, they move before the universe clears the path. They walk through resistance, and somehow the road forms beneath their feet. Because boldness is motion disguised as faith. Bravery is often celebrated because it looks noble. It's romantic to feel fear and stay still, to be almost ready. But boldness isn't romantic. It's gritty. It's restless. It's messy. It doesn't care about applause or perfection. It only cares about progress. The bold don't wait for the right time. They make time right. You can be brave and still be stuck. Bravery without motion is hesitation with good branding. It's potential pretending to be power. But boldness is the potential that learned how to walk. Here's the quiet truth no one wants to admit. Fear never leaves. Courage doesn't erase it. It just stops obeying it. Bold people feel the same fear you do. They just stopped negotiating with it. That's the hidden discipline. They act with fear still screaming in the background. Because they understand this. Fear doesn't mean stop. It means something important is on the line. There's a breaking point in every builder's story. A private moment that never makes it into the highlight reel. It's not the first success or the first win. It's the first time they acted, without knowing what would happen next. That's where boldness is born. Not in victory, but in surrender. Not the kind that gives up. The kind that says, I'm done waiting to feel ready. Boldness is built one unglamorous decision at a time. Not every act looks grand. Sometimes it's just sending the message, making the call, starting before you're sure. Every small act of movement is a vote for the future you claim to want. And over time, those votes become identity. Think of every person who changed the world. Every artist, every builder, every voice that shook history. They were all afraid. They just didn't stay there. They didn't wait for clarity. They created it. Because the bold know this truth. Action teaches faster than reflection ever will. Bravery looks outward for proof. Boldness looks inward for permission. That's why the brave often wait. They want certainty. They want safety. They want a guarantee. But the bold know something else entirely. There is no safety in waiting. Only regret. Only the quiet sound of time leaving the room. Let me tell you about the builder's paradox. The moment you start, you will look reckless to everyone who hasn't. They'll call you impulsive, impatient, unrealistic. But later, when the foundation stands, and the structure rises, they'll call you visionary. The bold don't wait for understanding. They build until understanding arrives. Because in this life, every beginning looks like madness, until it starts to work. Bravery ends where boldness begins. And the line between them isn't emotion, it's motion. Every act of courage that ever mattered looked like recklessness to someone who only knew how to dream. But that's what makes the bold different. They don't need to be understood. They only need to move. You've been brave long enough. You've imagined, waited, prepared. Now it's time to be bold. To move when your voice still shakes. To act before you feel ready. To trade fear for motion. And dreams for blueprints. Because the world doesn't remember who wanted to build. It remembers who did it. Bravery is a thought. Boldness is a decision. And the empire you've been imagining is waiting for your first act of movement. You don't need to kill your fear to move forward. You just need to learn how to use it. Because every builder's courage was once born from the very thing they tried to escape. Chapter 2: The Fire Beneath the Fear. Everyone wants to be fearless. But the truth is, fear never leaves. It just learns new disguises. In one season, it looks like hesitation. In another, it sounds like reason. It hides behind logic, timing, comfort, and waiting. You can't outgrow fear. You can only outmove it. The brave feel fear and freeze. The bold feel fear and build anyway. That's the fire beneath it, the part that doesn't destroy, but refines. Fear was never the enemy. It was the test that revealed who you really are. There's a reason fear appears right before something great. It guards every doorway worth walking through. Every new beginning has a gatekeeper, and that gatekeeper is fearful. Most people see that gate and turn around. But the bold, they walk through it while shaking. Because they've learned this truth, fear isn't a warning. It's an announcement. It means something meaningful is near. Fear burns the same way fire does. It can consume you, or it can cook what you've been trying to create. It depends on what you feed it. Feed fear your energy, and it multiplies. Feed it motion, and it becomes momentum. That's what separates the bold. They don't fight fear, they redirect it. We've been told to wait until the fear fades, to breathe through it, to outthink it. But fear doesn't fade. It follows motion like a shadow. And that's not punishment, that's proof. Because if it still scares you, it still matters. Boldness isn't the opposite of fear. It's what happens when fear finally meets movement. You'll never kill fear. You'll only change the shape it takes inside you. At first, it feels like resistance. Then, like energy. Then, I like to focus. Until one day, you realize it's been powering your motion all along. That's the secret. The fire beneath the fear was always meant to warm you, not burn you. Every person who ever built something that lasted had to learn this lesson. They didn't find peace before they began. They found peace while building. They were terrified of failure, of loss, of judgment. But they understood that fear was simply energy without a direction. So they gave it to me. When you move, you give your fear a job. You teach it to push instead of paralyze, to sharpen instead of shatter. That's how builders are made. They take the energy of fear and turn it into focus. There's a war that happens inside everyone before their first act of boldness. It's not a war between courage and fear. It's a war between movement and memory. Your mind remembers every failure, every loss, every humiliation. It whispers, "Don't try again. It's safer here." But your soul remembers something older, the part of you that knows how to build, how to rise, how to start even when it hurts. And that's the voice the bold follow. That's what it means to live with the fire beneath the fear, to stop asking the mind for permission and start trusting the body to move. The mind fears the unknown. The body just wants to create. Every builder has that moment where they stop thinking and start doing. You don't extinguish fear by waiting. You weaken it by working. Every small act is a blow to its authority. Every decision is proof you're taking your life back. And here's the paradox. The more you move, the quieter fear becomes. Because fear loses volume in motion. Some people think boldness is born in loud moments, the big speeches, the dramatic decisions. But real boldness is born in silence. It's the quiet, unseen moment when you finally say, "I'll do it anyway." That's when fear loses its crown. Fear doesn't make you weak. Avoiding it does. Because every time you back away, you train your brain to believe it's stronger than you. And every time you face it, you train your soul to remember what you're capable of. You don't defeat fear. You outgrow it. The truth is, every great life is built from some form of fear. The fear of wasting potential. The fear of dying unknown. The fear of being ordinary. You can run from it, or you can use it as oxygen. Because beneath every kind of fear lies the same spark, the proof that you still care. Bold people aren't fearless, they're fireproof. They stopped trying to put out the flames. They learned how to walk through them. They stopped waiting for calm. They built through chaos. And that's what separates them. You can live your whole life avoiding the fire, avoiding the risk, the pain, the fear. But what if the fire isn't there to end you? What if it's there to forge you? Every creator, every leader, every builder you admire was shaped in the heat of what scared them most. They didn't wait for the flame to fade. They stepped into it and came out changed. The bold know something simple. You don't rise after the fear. You rise through it. That's why they move while others plan. They're not fearless. They're faithful to the fire. Every act of motion you take against fear rewires your identity. You begin to realize you were never fragile, just unfinished. You don't become bold by erasing fear. You become bold by building around it. That's the real art, to create in the same space where you used to hesitate. The brave wait for fear to end. The bold let it ignite them. And that's the shift that changes everything, when you stop seeing fear as a stop sign and start seeing it as a spark. Fear is not the obstacle. Fear is the fuel. Don't wait for the fire to cool. Step into it. Let it burn off what doesn't belong. Let it shape what does. You'll come out scarred, but stronger. You'll come out humbled, but alive. Because the ones who build the world were never the ones who avoided the fire. They were the ones who became it. You are not meant to wait for fear to disappear. You are meant to learn how to dance with it until it loses its rhythm. Because fear can't survive inside a heart that keeps moving. And if you keep moving long enough, the fire that once frightened you becomes the light that guides you. Fear built the fire. Now, it's time to build the foundation. Because what comes next is not about survival. It's about structure. Chapter 3: The Architecture of Motion. Every act of boldness begins with motion. But motion without design eventually collapses. The brave move with emotion. The bold move with structure. Because building isn't about energy. It's about endurance. At first, movement feels like chaos. You wake up every day chasing the same dream, trying to make something real from something invisible. And somewhere in the blur of effort and hope, you realize this truth. The difference between chaos and creation is design. That's why boldness without architecture burns out. Energy gets you started. Discipline gets you there. It's easy to feel inspired for a week. It's harder to build rhythm for a lifetime. But that rhythm, that architecture of motion, is what separates the builders from the dreamers. Most people wait for the perfect feeling before they move. But boldness begins with the opposite. Moving until it feels right. That's the secret no one wants to say out loud. You build clarity by moving through confusion. You build confidence by moving through doubt. You build mastery by moving through the mess. Motion is the design process of courage. The architecture of motion starts small, with habits, systems, structure. The bold know that what you repeat becomes what you believe. So they don't chase motivation. They build mechanisms. A bold person doesn't ask, "How do I stay consistent?" They ask, "What must exist so I can't fail even when I'm tired?" That's architecture. If you want to build an empire, you have to stop living by emotion and start living by design. The brave chase intensity. The bold chase structure. They don't depend on motivation. They depend on rhythm. Every structure you see, a bridge, a building, a temple, was once 100 invisible blueprints on a desk no one saw. That's how boldness works, too. What the world calls success was built by small, repetitive acts that no one noticed. The bold aren't addicted to outcomes. They're addicted to the process. Here's the paradox. The more structure you build, the freer you become. Because structure doesn't restrict movement. It preserves it. Discipline isn't a cage. It's the scaffolding of freedom. The bold understand this law. Motion without form exhausts. Motion with form expands. Imagine a dancer without rhythm, a painter without a frame, a builder without a plan. They might have talent, but they'll never create a legacy. That's the cost of impulsive courage. You burn bright, but you burn out. Boldness isn't intensity. It's intentionality. You don't design motion once. You design it daily. Every morning is a new blueprint. Every decision is another line drawn. If you want to see what someone believes in, don't listen to what they say. Watch what they repeat. Because repetition reveals design. The architecture of motion isn't about speed. It's about direction. The brave chase momentum. The bold create systems that multiply it. They understand that consistency isn't a gift of motivation. It's the result of design. They don't depend on willpower. They depend on the environment. That's how boldness lasts. Boldness is not just movement. It's a movement that remembers where it's going. It's motion guided by meaning. It's courage shaped by design. When you know what you're building, you stop wasting time breaking what works. The brave restart often. The bold refinement. The world glorifies the spark, but it's the structure that keeps the flame alive. Every builder knows that. The spark gets the applause. The scaffolding gets the results. And here's the truth the world hides. Boldness isn't spontaneous. It's engineered. It's built from self-respect, from daily rituals, from protecting your time like sacred ground. You can't be bold in the world if you're careless with your design, because every act of power is built on a foundation of order. That's the paradox of the builder. They look impulsive from a distance, because their motion looks effortless. But inside the motion is a method. Every word is measured, every step aligned, every risk is calculated. That's the art of motion, to make structure look like flow. When the brave move, it's emotional. When the bold moves, it's architectural. That's why the bold rarely crumble. Their motion has memory. Their habits hold them when motivation disappears. Their systems protect them when energy fades. They built for the day they'd feel weak. And that's why they stay strong. Motion is not random. It's a pattern written by intention. The bold don't chase consistency. They become it. Because when motion has architecture, life becomes predictable in the best way. Not boring, but stable enough for miracles to happen. You were never meant to live by reaction. You were meant to design your direction. And when your movement gains form, your courage becomes creation. That's the architecture of motion. Designing a life that keeps building, even on the days you want to stop. The brave move when it feels right. The bold move because it's right. They've built so much rhythm that hesitation has nowhere to live. That's what discipline is. The safety net beneath every act of courage. It's not cold. It's not mechanical. It's proof of love in motion. You can't sustain boldness on feelings that fluctuate. You sustain it with systems that stay. That's the architecture you need to build, not just plans and goals, but support. A structure that holds you steady when life shakes the ground. The bold know. Motion is sacred. Every action is a brick. Every decision, a pillar. Every failure, a redesign. You build yourself the same way you build a city. Slowly, with purpose, and with grace for your own process. So if you're in motion, stay. Even if it's small. Even if it's invisible. Because one day, you'll look back and realize you've been building the foundation for everything you once prayed for. That's how empires rise. Quietly, daily, intentionally. The structure is built. Now it's time to claim it. Because what comes next isn't about design anymore. It's about ownership. Chapter 4. The Weight of Permission. You were taught to ask before you moved, to wait before you spoke, to seek approval before you acted. That lesson was meant to make you polite. But over time, it made you powerless. Because when you spend too long asking for permission, you start believing you need it. The world won't tell you this, but most people aren't afraid of failure. They're afraid of disapproval. The silent fear of being seen as too much, too fast, too different, too early. And so they wait. For validation. For consensus. For a nod that never comes. But the bold. They stopped waiting for the nod. They gave it to themselves. The weight of permission is invisible, but you feel it everywhere. It's in the hesitation before you post your work. It's in the silence after you share your idea. It's in the small pause, where you wonder if it's okay to shine. That's how conditioning works. It doesn't stop you with chains. It stops you with questions. What if I fail? What will they say? Who do I think I am? Every great dream dies in that hesitation. The bold learn early. If you keep asking for permission, you'll spend your whole life waiting for someone else's approval to begin your own. You can't build greatness on borrowed validation, because when you depend on permission, you trade your authority for acceptance. The truth is, you were never meant to fit their design. Your vision came to you for a reason. It wasn't sent as a group invitation. It was a private assignment. And every time you shrink it, to make it acceptable, you dishonor the reason you were chosen for it. The world rewards obedience until it needs innovation. They'll praise you for following the rules until someone breaks them and wins. And then they'll call that person visionary. That's the irony of life. Most people admire rebels only after they've been proven right. So don't wait for applause to validate your motion. Because if you need their approval now, you'll need their permission forever. Here's the truth. The bold don't disrespect the world. They just refuse to obey its limits. They understand that real leadership always begins in misunderstanding. Because when you build what hasn't been built before, you will always look wrong to those who never tried. And that's okay. You weren't sent to be understood. You were sent to build. You don't owe the world permission for your pace, your passion, or your process. Because the same people who question your speed will later ask how you did it. The same people who call you too much will later wish they'd done more. That's the pattern of permission. The world resists what it secretly envies. The weight of permission isn't just cultural. It's emotional. You start to believe that peace means agreement, that love means approval. But it doesn't. Peace is alignment. Love is truth. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is disappointing the version of you that only lived for others. Every builder reaches this point, where you realize you've built enough for others, and not enough for yourself. You wake up one day, and realize the life you've been maintaining is smaller than the one you were meant to create. That moment hurts. It's heavy. It's disorienting. But it's the beginning of real power, when you finally stop asking and start declaring. Permission is just the polite version of control. The system says, "Wait your turn." The bold say, "I make my turn." And they're not being arrogant. They're being responsible. Because every minute you wait for someone else to choose you, you delay the destiny that's already calling your name. You have to learn to bless yourself, to say yes to your own calling, before anyone else believes in it. Because no one else can see what you see, and no one else can build what you're meant to build. That's why boldness is lonely at first. It feels like rebellion, but it's really obedience to something higher than approval. You were never waiting for the world's permission. You were waiting for your own. That's the weight you've been carrying, not their expectations, but your hesitation. You've been the warden and the prisoner, the judge and the accused. But now, you can pardon yourself. The moment you stop asking for permission, you start living from authority. That's the shift that changes everything. You no longer need validation. You give it. You no longer chase peace. You embody it. You no longer perform for approval. You move from conviction. That's what liberation sounds like. Boldness begins the day you realize you are the permission. Your motion itself is the approval. Your voice itself is the authority. And every time you move without waiting, you teach the world what leadership actually looks like. The weight doesn't disappear overnight. It lessens with each decision you make without asking. Each time you say yes to yourself, you take another brick off your back. Until one day, you look up and realize you were never being held down. You were just holding yourself back. Let them misunderstand you. Let them call you different. That's the price of permissionless living. But in exchange, you gain something priceless. Clarity. The kind of clarity that can't be shaken, because it wasn't borrowed. When you finally let go of the weight of permission, you become dangerous, not to others, but to limited self. Because the world can't control someone who no longer needs its approval to move. That's the quiet power of the bold. They lead not by force, but by freedom. You'll know you've arrived when you no longer need to explain your motion. You simply move. You simply build. You simply become. And the world eventually adjusts to your rhythm. Because leadership isn't about convincing. It's about becoming undeniable. So give yourself the permission they never will. To start. To grow. To outgrow. To rise. You've earned this liberation. You've built enough for others. Now build for you. The world will catch up later. And when it does, you'll already be gone, building what they once said couldn't exist. That's the lightness that follows the weight. Freedom, ownership, peace. You were never waiting for permission. You were waiting to remember who you were before you needed it. Permission freed you. Now solitude will form you. Because every builder must learn how to be alone long enough to hear the sound of their own creation. Chapter 5. The Solitude of Builders. Every builder disappears at some point. Not because the world forgets them, but because creation requires distance. You can't build and perform at the same time. One demands attention. The other demands focus. There's a loneliness that comes when you stop seeking validation and start seeking vision. It's not punishment. It's a process. Because solitude is the workshop of destiny. When the noise fades, you meet the truth about who you are. And most people never do, because they never stop long enough to listen. They drown in constant connection, mistaking attention for affirmation. But builders know, the real work begins when the crowd disappears. The world romanticizes creation. It shows the launch, the lights, the applause. But it never shows the months of silence, the isolation, the long conversations with doubt. That's where greatness is built, not in the noise of celebration, but in the still rhythm of repetition. There's a difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is when you feel unseen. Solitude is when you start to see yourself. Loneliness empties. Solitude fills. Because solitude isn't about distance from people. It's about proximity to purpose. When you first choose solitude, it feels like exile. You miss the noise, the validation, the rhythm of belonging. But then something happens. The silence starts to speak. You begin to hear your own thoughts again, to rediscover your voice, to meet the parts of yourself you've ignored. That's when solitude turns sacred. Every builder reaches this turning point, when you realize that the world can't understand what it didn't hear being built. You stop explaining. You start creating. Because creation doesn't need commentary. It just needs consistency. The bold know how to vanish. They know that silence doesn't mean stillness. It means strategy. Every season of isolation is preparing your next revelation. That's why the bold don't panic when it gets quiet. They listen deeper. There's a discipline in solitude. It's where you learn to move without being seen, to work without applause, to stay consistent without recognition. Because solitude forces you to decide. whether you're doing it for approval or for purpose. That's the real test. Can you keep building when no one's watching? Can you pour everything you have into something that no one else understands yet? That's what separates artists from architects, dreamers from builders. The bold know that legacy is built in silence and revealed in time. Solitude is not the absence of people. It's the presence of purpose. You're not cut off. You're being called in. Into focus. Into depth. Into divine alignment. Because the deeper you go within, the higher you rise without. Every builder must face the mirror of solitude. It shows you everything you've avoided. Your fears. Your impatience. Your unhealed doubts. And yet, it's that mirror that polishes your clarity. When you can sit with yourself without distraction, you learn to lead yourself without direction. In solitude, you stop chasing answers. You start building them. Because solitude isn't passive. It's productive in a way the world can't measure. You build your mind first. Then form follows. That's the law of every great creation. Vision precedes visibility. The world fears solitude because it confuses presence with relevance. But the bold know, the longer you're silent, the more powerful your return. Because solitude isn't retreat, it's refined. You don't step back to disappear. You step back to design. You'll lose people during this season. Not because they're bad, but because they're not meant to see the blueprint. Creation demands privacy. You can't invite everyone into the room, where your vision is still taking form. Some will misunderstand your silence. Others will misinterpret your distance. But that's okay. You're not isolating. You're incubating. Solitude matures you. It teaches you to work from peace instead of pressure, to move from conviction instead of comparison. It's where you learn that rest is strategy, that quiet is strength, that reflection is direction. And when you finally re-emerge, you don't seek the world's approval. You serve it with what you've built. You're not behind because you're alone. You're ahead because you're focused. The world runs in circles. Builders move in alignment. And that's why they rise differently. Slowly, steadily, permanently. Solitude is the crucible of authenticity. When no one is watching, you finally stop performing. That's where truth grows. In the moments no one will ever see. You stop trying to be impressive. You start trying to be accurate. Because the goal is no longer attention. It's alignment. In solitude, you discover that you never needed the crowd. You only needed clarity. And once you find it, you become unstoppable. Not because you're loud, but because you're sure. That's the quiet power of solitude. It makes you certain. So if you feel alone right now, don't rush to fill the silence. Let it form you. Let it teach you. Because one day, you'll look back and realize, this was the chapter that built your foundation. The solitude you once resented was the silence your destiny required. Builders don't fear being alone. They fear building without alignment. So if solitude is your current season, don't fight it. Breathe into it. Build inside it. Because silence is where strength finds its voice. When you return from solitude, you'll move differently. Not louder, but clearer. Not faster, but firmer. You'll speak less, listen more, and move only when it matters. Because solitude doesn't make you distant. It makes you decisive. You can't lead crowds if you're still afraid of quiet. The bold know this truth. The deeper your solitude, the stronger your impact. Because when you master isolation, you stop needing affirmation. And that's when your voice becomes power, not performance. You're not disappearing. You're deepening. Every empire needs its architect. Every architect needs their solitude. Because only in solitude can you design something strong enough to survive the noise that's coming next. Solitude builds your strength. Now it's time to carry what you saw there. Because every builder's piece is tested by the weight of their own vision. Chapter 6: The Burden of Vision. Every vision looks beautiful from a distance. Up close, it's heavy. You don't just see what could be. You feel what must be built. That weight, that is the price of sight. The moment you see clearly, you become responsible for what you've seen. Because vision isn't a gift, it's an assignment. Most people look and move on. Builders look and build. There's a loneliness that comes with seeing ahead. You speak a language the crowd hasn't learned yet. You describe what doesn't exist, and they call you delusional. You plan for tomorrow, and they think you're wasting today. That's the burden of vision. It's easier to be blind. Blind people don't have to carry the weight of what could be done. They live in peace, but they never know the purpose. The visionary lives with tension between what is and what should be. Every morning feels like a mission you can't turn off. You don't forget what you've seen. It haunts you until you honor it. That's why true builders rarely rest fully. Not because they're addicted to work, but because they're burdened by clarity. They know too much to stay still. Vision asks for your life in installments. It won't take everything at once, but it will take everything eventually. Your comfort, your certainty, your old identities. Because what you carry inside must make room to be born outside. And birth is always a burden before it's a blessing. People will misunderstand you. That's the first tax of vision. They won't see what you see until it's done. And by then, it's obvious. So stop explaining. Start executing. Your proof will speak louder than your plans. The burden of vision isn't just loneliness. It's patience. Because you see things before their time. And time moves slowly for those who see quickly. That's why the bold must learn to wait without withering. Every visionary has a season where nothing works. Where you're doing everything right. And nothing is responding. That's the testing ground. Vision is refined in delay, because delay reveals devotion. If you quit because it's quiet, you are in it for validation, not vision. The burden of vision is the weight of knowing that you could do more, and must. It's the ache of unrealized potential, the pull of unbuilt worlds. And it doesn't go away until you start building. The world thinks vision is inspiration. But inspiration is light. Vision is weight. Because it doesn't just show you beauty. It shows you are responsible. It says, "This exists because you exist." The brave talk about what they see. The bold build it. Because seeing is not enough. If you don't move, your vision rots into regret. That's why so many die with potential. Because they mistook the idea for the act. Vision without execution is just fantasy with good lighting. To carry vision, you must build shoulders stronger than doubt. Because the moment you decide to see, you also agree to carry. And sometimes that means walking alone with weight you can't explain. But under that pressure, you develop the muscle of faith. Faith is what turns burden into a blueprint. It says, "I don't know how, but I know who I am." And from that identity, you keep building. Because the weight doesn't crush you when you remember it was given to you for a reason. You carry it because you can. There will be nights when you doubt the vision. When the burden feels too big for your hands. That's when you remember. You were never asked to finish it alone. You were asked to begin. The moment you move, help starts finding you. But it only finds those already in motion. The burden of vision teaches humility. You learn that purpose is bigger than ego. You stop building for credit and start building for continuity. You realize the vision isn't about you being seen. It's about the world being changed. That's why it's heavy. Every great vision comes with a cost. The cost is comfort. You can't hold a vision and a normal life in the same hands. One will always drop. That's why the bold choose destiny over ease. When the burden feels too heavy, remember, you're not meant to carry it alone. You're meant to carry it first. You're the bridge between vision and reality. And a bridge must bear weight. Before anyone else can cross. You'll know you're maturing when you stop resenting the burden. Because that's when it stops feeling like pressure. And starts feeling like purpose. It doesn't get lighter. You just get stronger. Every vision has a voice. It calls you when you sleep. It interrupts you when you're comfortable. And until you answer, nothing else feels right. That's not a curse. That's calling. You can't run from vision. You can only run from obedience. But when you return, the vision will be waiting, exactly where you left it. And it will ask, "Are you ready to carry me this time?" Carry it with grace. Carry it with discipline. Carry it with quiet confidence. Because the burden isn't there to break you. It's there to build you into someone who can hold the weight of what's coming. Vision without burden is daydream. Burden without vision is misery. But together, they forge destiny. That's the balance of builders. Seeing what others don't. Carrying what others won't. Until the world finally catches up. One day, the weight will make sense. You'll look back and realize you were being trained to carry more. Because every vision that outlives you requires a version of you strong enough to sustain it. That's what this burden is doing. Building capacity for what's next. You've carried the vision. Now you must carry yourself through the weight of time. Because every dream you build will test your endurance before it reveals its reward. Chapter 7. The Courage to Endure. Every dream looks light in the beginning. Then time adds its weight. The first days are easy. You have adrenaline, hope, belief. But then the silence comes. The waiting. I'm wondering. The long stretch between effort and evidence. That's where most quit. That's where the bold begins. Endurance isn't glamorous. It's not the stage lights or the applause. It's the dark room at 3 a.m. when no one knows your name, and your dream is still an idea fighting for air. You keep showing up, not because you see results, but because you made a promise to yourself. That's courage. The brave start when it's exciting. The bold stay when it's hard. That's the real difference. Anyone can begin. Few can continue. Because continuing means believing. Without proof. It means trusting that repetition isn't wasted time. It's faith in motion. There's a point in every journey where it stops feeling inspiring and starts feeling impossible. That's not failure. That's the test. Every empire you admire was built in seasons that felt endless. While the world celebrated others, the builders kept their heads down and kept their hands moving. That's the unseen work of greatness. The universe will test your patience before it reveals your reward. Not to punish you, but to prepare you. Because you can't carry the promise if you can't carry the process. Endurance isn't strength. It's alignment. It's staying steady when your emotions try to pull you away. It's the discipline of showing up on days when belief feels buried. That's when your dream starts to trust you back. You can't rush what's meant to grow deep. Roots form in darkness. The deeper they go, the higher you'll rise later. So when it feels slow, it's not punishment. It's the foundation. Because endurance builds depth that speed can't replace. There will be seasons when it looks like nothing is happening. But something always is. You're being stretched, refined, sharpened. Every delay is developing dimensions in you that success will later require. The bold learn to find rhythm in repetition. They treat the mundane like the sacred. They know that what feels ordinary now will become extraordinary later. Because consistency transforms everything it touches. That's endurance. Doing small things faithfully until they become timeless. Sometimes you won't see results for months. Sometimes years. But remember this. Delayed doesn't mean denied. The vision you planted is growing roots. And every quiet day there is still movement underground. You can't measure progress by what's visible. You measure it by what refuses to die. The real question isn't can you start? It's can you stay? When motivation leaves, will you stay loyal to your mission? When results stall, will you trust the rhythm you built? Because endurance is proof of devotion. Most people quit, not because they can't do it, but because they can't wait for it. Patience feels like punishment when you confuse progress with speed. But the bold know. Greatness isn't a sprint. It's survival. You're not being tested to fail. You're being tested to strengthen. Each trial is shaping the person your dream requires. Because every promise comes with preparation. And that preparation always arrives disguised as pressure. You'll want to quit. You'll question your timing. You'll question yourself. But courage isn't the absence of doubt. It's the refusal to stop despite it. You endure not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. The bold understand seasons. They know winter doesn't mean death. It means rest. Every dormant phase is a preparation for new growth. So when everything feels slow or empty, remind yourself, you're not stuck, you're strengthening. Endurance changes your identity. It makes you resilient where you were once reactive. You stop chasing the rush of new beginnings and start respecting the power of consistency. Because the bold don't get addicted to starting. They get addicted to staying. Every time you stay, you prove you're ready for more. Because what you can sustain determines what you can receive. That's why the universe doesn't give you everything at once. It's waiting to see if you can endure what you asked for. If it's taking longer than you planned, it's because it's becoming greater than you imagined. Delay isn't denial. It's design. Endurance isn't wasted time. It's proof of alignment. You're not waiting for life to move. Life is waiting for you to mature. You can't rush divine timing. You can only rise to meet it. So keep building. Keep trusting. Keep showing up. Especially when it's hardest. Because the reward doesn't come to the inspired. It comes to be consistent. And one day, the season will shift. Doors will open quietly. Opportunities will appear effortlessly. And it'll look like it happened overnight. But you'll know. It took nights you almost gave up. Mornings you built through exhaustion. Days you chose faith over evidence. That's the secret. Endurance turns ordinary effort into eternal impact. Courage isn't loud. It's steady. It's not the shout of triumph. It's the whisper of "I'm still here." And that whisper echoes louder in the universe than any applause ever could. You've learned to endure. Now, you'll see what endurance reveals. The separation between those who dream and those who build. Chapter 8: The Builders and the Bystanders. There comes a moment in every journey when you stop explaining and start observing. You begin to see the world in two kinds of people: the builders and the bystanders. Both feel the same fear. Both want the same things. But only one moves through the doubt. That's the difference. That's destiny. Bystanders talk about change. Builders become it. Bystanders admire courage. Builders live it. Bystanders wait for the right moment. Builders make the moment right. And the world rewards the ones who act. Not because they were more talented, but because they refused to stay still. Most people don't fail because they lack potential. They fail because they confuse motion with meaning. They talk about what they'll do. They research what they'll do. They post about what they'll do. But they never actually do it. Because doing it means leaving the comfort of discussion and entering the discomfort of execution. The bystanders live in commentary. The builders live in consequence. One plays safe in theory. The other risks reputation in reality. Because ideas are cheap. Execution is sacred. And that's why the bold don't announce their plans. They reveal their results. You'll notice something once you start building. People love potential until it starts becoming real. When you dream, they cheer. When you act, they question. Because your courage confronts their comfort. And not everyone can stand in the light. That exposes their excuses. But you keep building anyway. Because the work isn't about proving them wrong. It's about proving yourself right. That's the quiet truth of builders. They're not driven by praise or validation. They're driven by necessity. They build because they must. Because not building feels like dying. The bystander waits for the perfect moment. The builder creates progress out of imperfect ones. Because the builder knows. The world doesn't pause for preparation. You don't need everything to be ready. You just need to be willing. That's what separates the few who move from the many who hesitate. Bystanders ask questions to delay action. Builders ask questions to refine it. That's the quiet paradox of progress. The more you move, the clearer things become. The more you wait, the heavier it all feels. Because clarity doesn't come from thinking. It comes from doing. Every builder knows this feeling. You start to outgrow the crowd that only watches. You start craving fewer opinions and more output. You stop attending discussions that never turn into directions. And that's not arrogance. It's evolution. The bystanders think the builder got lucky. They never saw the nights of failure, the hours of repetition, the days of doubt. Because real work happens in the shadows, long before the world ever sees the light. That's why builders walk differently. They carry peace in the places others panic. When you build long enough, you stop comparing. Because you realize, comparison is the bystander's sport. Builders don't have time to compete. They're too busy constructing. They don't scroll for inspiration. They create it. They don't wait for sign. They become one. Every time you build, you widen the gap between who talks and who transforms. That's not pride. That's the purpose manifesting in real time. Because building changes your language, your circle, your sense of time. You stop measuring life in hours. You measure it in output. The builder doesn't need validation. Because their results already speak fluently. Every finished piece of work says, I didn't wait for the world to agree. And that's why the world eventually listens. Because silence paired with progress is impossible to ignore. The bystanders laugh early. The builders laugh last. Because when the dust settles, noise disappears, but structures remain. The world forgets opinions, but it remembers what was built. It takes courage to build publicly and fail quietly, to keep trying when the world is watching, to keep moving when it would be easier to hide. That's what separates legacy from mediocrity, persistence through perception. You'll notice, bystanders always have advice, but never results. Builders rarely speak, because they're too busy creating evidence. That's why when they finally do speak, people listen. Not because of their volume, but because of their validity. There's a quiet authority that comes from having built something with your hands, your heart, and your time. No one can take that from you, because the proof of your work is stronger than the doubt of their words. You don't have to prove the bystanders wrong. They'll do that themselves. When they realize they stayed talking while you kept walking, let them wonder how you did it. Let them scroll through what they could have built. That's not arrogance. That's evidence. The day you stop explaining your pace, you graduate from the crowd. Because builders don't defend motion. They demonstrate it. You don't owe the world updates. You owe your purpose completion. Every masterpiece began as a quiet rebellion against stagnation. Someone got tired of waiting for change and decided to become one. And every bystander who mocked them became their audience. That's the irony. The same people who doubted your motion will one day quote your word. Keep building. Keep refining. Keep rising quietly. Because nothing silences doubt like undeniable progress. And nothing humbles noise like steady motion. You've seen the difference between those who build and those who only dream. Now, let your results speak louder than your presence. Because when the work speaks, the world listens. Chapter 9. When the work speaks. There comes a time when words retire, when explanations lose their purpose, and all that remains is evidence. You've spent years learning patience, discipline, and quiet persistence. Now, the work begins to speak. Not in noise, not in pride, but in presence. Every result you've created whispers louder than your voice ever could. Because the work tells a story that words can't hold. You don't have to tell them you've changed. They'll feel it. In your calm, in your consistency, in your clarity. Because results radiate. They travel farther than their reputation. When the work speaks, you stop needing validation. Because validation was just proof. You hadn't proven it to yourself yet. Now you know. You've earned this version of peace. It's not arrogance. It's arrival. The builder who once whispered to walls now stands before the echoes of his own endurance. Every brick you laid in silence, every sleepless night you thought no one saw, the world sees now. And it listens, not because you shouted, but because you stayed. The world trusts what it can't ignore. That's why results have more gravity than promises. You've turned patience into power, persistence into proof. Your quiet effort has become undeniable evidence. There's a moment every creator reaches, when they stop chasing attention and start attracting it. Because the work begins to call for itself. People will find it, share it, feel it. And you won't have to say a word. The bold never rush the reveal. They know that when the work is ready, it introduces itself. That's why you never saw them panic. They trusted their process. Because when the work speaks, it sounds like destiny. You'll know this season by the calm it brings. Not because everything got easier, but because you got certain. Certain of your rhythm. Certain of your craft. Certain of your calling. That's what mastery feels like. Quiet confidence, earned slowly. Those who doubted you will begin to look confused. Not because you proved them wrong, but because they finally see what you saw all along. And by then, you won't need their recognition. The satisfaction will already live in your stillness. When the work speaks, you stop defending yourself. Because defense is for the uncertain. And you're not uncertain anymore. You've built too much to doubt yourself now. There's a rhythm that comes with momentum. You wake up calm. You move deliberate. You create without craving a reaction. That's when you know you've shifted. From chasing to commanding. You're no longer proving. You're producing. Every masterpiece starts with misunderstanding. Every legacy begins in isolation. But when the work speaks, it speaks fluently in results. It translates sacrifice into significance. And it reminds you why the waiting was worth it. There will always be noise. There will always be critics. But you'll notice. Their voices get quieter as your results get louder. Because even silence has weight when it's filled with proof. The world measures time in minutes. Builders measure it in milestones. Because progress has its own clock. It doesn't tick. It transforms. You won't always need applause. Eventually, you'll crave peace instead. Because applause feeds the ego. But peace feeds the soul. And the soul is what sustains the work. Long after the noise fades. When the work speaks, you realize how little you needed recognition. And how much you needed resolve. Because recognition fades. Resolve remains. The bold don't rush to explain. They wait to be understood by time. Because time always sides with consistency. And consistency always wins the conversation. That noise starts. There's nothing left to prove. When the work starts to echo, your life becomes a lesson. You don't preach anymore. You embody. That's when you've crossed over. From building to becoming. And the beautiful irony is that while they were doubting you, you were building the very thing they now admire. You didn't need them to believe in you. You needed to keep believing while they didn't. That's the rarest kind of faith. Every creation has a voice. Yours doesn't shout. It resonates. It doesn't demand attention. It earns it through excellence. Because the bold don't demand recognition. They deserve it, quietly. You've reached the moment where the work speaks for itself. Let it. You've spent enough time explaining. Now, let your evidence breathe. Because the most powerful statement you'll ever make is the life you built. You've seen what happens when the work speaks. Now you'll learn why it keeps speaking. Because courage obeys laws far older than fear. Every action creates energy. Every bold step changes the field around you. Chapter 10. The Physics of Courage. Courage isn't magic. It's motion. Every time you act in faith, you alter the field around you. Because courage obeys laws. Just like gravity. Just like energy. Just like the truth. It cannot be created from comfort. It only appears when resistance meets movement. Fear exists to be transformed, not avoided. It's friction. It's fuel. It's force. And when you move through it, you convert hesitation into energy. That's the first law of courage. What you confront, you convert. You can't think your way into power. You must act your way into alignment. Because thought creates potential, but motion releases energy. Every decision is a collision between what you fear and what you desire. And every collision generates growth. In physics, energy never disappears. It only transfers. The same is true for courage. Every act of bravery leaves a trace. Every bold step builds momentum that doesn't fade. It compounds. That's why consistency becomes unstoppable. You're not starting over every day. You're carrying forward unseen energy. Fear slows down energy. Faith accelerates it. The bold understand that hesitation has mass. It weighs down motion. But once you move, the weight begins to fall away. Momentum builds velocity. Velocity becomes gravity. Soon, what was hard to start becomes impossible to stop. That's the second law of courage. Once in motion, stay in motion. The world rewards momentum, not perfection. Because courage compounds like interest. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. You felt it before. That shifts from thinking to doing. That invisible surge that comes after the first move. That's energy aligning with purpose. Once you take that first step, the universe rearranges to meet you halfway. Because courage doesn't wait for conditions. It creates them. Fear's favorite lie is wait until you're ready. But courage knows readiness is a myth. The physics of courage says, motion creates readiness. You start afraid, and by the second step, you've already changed form. That's how transformation works. Movement first, confidence later. In still water, nothing changes. But drop a single stone, and waves ripple outward endlessly. That's what one decision does. It touches everything around it. It awakens dormant energy in places you can't see. One bold act shifts the equation of your entire life. The bold don't just react to the world. They generate energy within it. Every time they move in faith, they bend the field of possibility. That's not spirituality. That's physics. Because action creates attraction. And what you pursue with conviction starts to move toward you in return. That's why courage feels magnetic. It's alignment with truth. And truth has its own frequency. When you act on what's real, the unreal begins to fall away. People who don't resonate with your rhythm begin to fade. Doors that match your strength begin to open. Because courage recalibrates everything around you. Fear speaks in theories. Courage speaks in results. Every action backed by truth creates an echo, a vibration that carries your name. That's why courage outlives you. Because energy never dies. The physics of courage is simple. The more resistance, the more potential power. That's why life doesn't remove the pressure. It multiplies it. Because pressure proves potential. It's the weight that activates your will. The bold don't run from it. They refine themselves within it. When you stay in motion long enough, You stop feeling fear the same way. It doesn't vanish. It transforms into focus. You start seeing obstacles as equations, and every equation has a solution. That's how the bold think. Not emotionally, but energetically. Every time you move with purpose, you raise your frequency. You start attracting higher forms of challenge, higher levels of people, higher layers of peace. Because courage evolves with practice. You can't master it by reading, only by doing. You don't need to feel fearless to act boldly. You just need to move through fear. Fear loses power when it meets friction. That's the third law of courage. Resistance reveals your strength. It's not about having no fear. It's about refusing to let fear make the final decision. Every bold life is built on thousands of small acts of defiance. Moments where you chose courage over comfort, again and again. And over time, those moments build an empire. The truth is, you can't fake momentum. It's either there or it isn't. And it only comes from consistent, courageous motion. You can't buy it. You can't post it. You have to earn it. The bold aren't lucky. They're aligned. Their energy matches their effort. Their results match their rhythm. Because they've learned that faith without motion is just imagination. But motion with faith is transformation. So keep moving. Even when you can't see the finish line. Even when progress feels invisible. Because courage has its own gravity. And once it starts pulling you forward, not even doubt can stop it. You are no longer who you were when you started. You're no longer thinking about change. You are changed. And everything around you is adjusting to that truth. That's the real physics of courage. Movement reshapes matter. Every act of bravery shifts the balance of the world. Slightly, but permanently. And that's why courage is never wasted. Because the world becomes a little freer. Every time one person moves forward in faith. You've learned the laws of motion. How courage becomes energy. And energy becomes momentum. Now, you'll see what that momentum creates. The legacy left behind by those who never stop. Ed Moving. Chapter 11. The Legacy of Builders. The goal was never to be seen. It was to build something that would still stand when you're gone. You've spent years chasing meaning. You've sacrificed comfort for creation. You've built in silence while others watched. Now, you begin to see why it all mattered. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you build within. Because the world forgets names, but it never forgets the impact. The bold don't aim to be remembered. They aim to matter. Every time you act with integrity, you carve your initials into eternity. Not with words, but with proof. Legacy is invisible architecture. It's the unseen structure holding others long after you stop. You've learned that real success isn't about applause. It's about alignment. It's about living a life that continues to speak, even after your voice goes quiet. That's what the bold understand. They're not chasing recognition. They're building resonance. The bystanders vanish with the trend. The builders remain in the foundation. You might not always see their faces, but you stand on what they made. Because builders shape the invisible. They bend history with quiet hands. Legacy isn't loud. It's patient. It's precise. It's personal. It's found in the work no one sees, but everyone feels. That's the secret of builders. Their fingerprints are everywhere, but their names don't need to be. You'll notice something about every legacy that lasts. It was born from endurance, not ego. Because ego builds for validation. Endurance builds for generations. The bold never rush their impact. They craft it with years of invisible excellence. Every masterpiece began as one person's stubborn refusal to stop. That's legacy. Stubborn love meeting sacred work. You didn't build to be famous. You built because your soul couldn't stay quiet. That's what separates the dreamers from the architects. One wants attention. The other wants eternity. The bold understand something most never will. You can't build for applause and expect longevity. Because applause fades fast, but purpose echoes forever. That's why the world eventually forgets names, but never forgets works of truth. Every generation has its builders, the ones who move quietly, love deeply, and leave more than they found. They build schools, songs, systems, movements, memories. And even when their names fade, their fingerprints keep shaping what comes next. That's the beauty of your journey. You've gone from chasing success to carry significance. You've stopped trying to prove yourself to the world. Now you build to serve it. Because purpose is the final evolution of ambition. Legacy begins the moment you stop building for yourself. It begins when you start creating for someone you may never meet. That's when your work becomes eternal. Because energy built in service never dies. It multiplies. You don't need to reach millions. You just need to reach one. And that one becomes many. That's how impact grows. From hearts, not headlines. The legacy of builders is this. They leave blueprints, not statues. They inspire construction, not imitation. Because the bold don't want followers. They want successors. There's a point when your purpose stops being about you. It becomes about what continues because of you. That's when you've crossed the threshold. From success to significance. And significance, partner. That's immortality in motion. You'll know you've built something real when others start building because of you. Not for you. Because of you. Because real builders don't create followers. They create freedom. Freedom to dream, to act, to rise. And maybe you'll never see the full reach of your work. But that's the nature of legacy. It grows in places your eyes will never go. And one day, long after you're gone, someone will rise because of what you built. And that's when the story continues. Not in your name, but in your impact. The bold don't wait for monuments. They leave movements. They know the real reward isn't recognition. It's remembrance through transformation. That's what legacy sounds like. Not noise, but resonance. So keep building. Even when you feel unseen. Even when the applause is silent. Because unseen work creates unshakable worlds. And what you're building now will outlive every name spoken in the noise. You've learned the cost, the process, and the permanence of building. Now, it's time to see what happens when the builder becomes the lesson itself. When your life stops being a project and becomes the blueprint. Chapter 12. The bold become the blueprint. Every builder begins as a seeker, searching for a way, searching for meaning, searching for proof that their dream was possible. But after the building, after the fire, after the years, something shifts. You stop looking for the path. You become it. That's the quiet miracle of motion. You start by following examples and end by becoming one. The bold don't just finish their work. They turn into it. Because what you build externally eventually mirrors what you've built within. You've spent years chasing answers. Now, your life is one. Your story has become the evidence. For those still standing where you once stood, you don't have to teach anymore. You just have to exist. Because your presence now carries the wisdom your words used to seek. The blueprint isn't a map. It's a memory of how you survived, how you stayed, how you rebuilt. Every scar is an instruction. Every failure, a foundation line. Every triumph, a reminder. You've become living architecture. The bold don't create manuals. They create models. People don't follow their words. They follow their example. Because truth taught is one thing. Truth is transformation. You've realized something sacred. You were never meant to build for eternity. You were meant to build for eternity. The lessons that shaped you will now shape others through you. Not because you told them how, but because you showed them it's possible. This is what happens when purpose matures. It stops shouting. It starts radiating. You walk differently. You speak slower. You see clearer. Because your energy has become instruction. You don't need to explain the blueprint. You embody it. The blueprint is built from your becoming. Every delay taught you patience. Every failure taught you structure. Every season of solitude taught you strength. And all those lessons layered together became your foundation. That's why what broke you once can't break you now. Because you've been reconstructed in truth. The bold don't seek followers. They awaken builders. Every great life leaves behind momentum, energy others can inherit. That's a legacy in motion. That's how empires outlive their architects. You've become a vibration that will keep rippling through generations. When people see you now, they don't just see effort. They see endurance. They see embodiment. They see what happens when someone refuses to shrink. And quietly, your courage gives them permission to rise. You've learned that leadership isn't a position, it's a presence. You don't demand respect. You inspire it by existing truthfully. Because when you stand in authenticity, the world rearranges around you. That's the blueprint at work. It builds while you breathe. The bold become blueprints because they stopped waiting to be led. They became the lesson. They couldn't find it. That's evolution. That's destiny fulfilled. You are no longer the student of courage. You are its expression. This chapter of your life isn't about proving anything anymore. It's about maintaining what you've built and modeling what's possible. Because mastery doesn't seek movement. It is a movement. You've reached the point where stillness and strength are the same thing. The blueprint you've become will outlast your voice. It will travel through lives you'll never meet. Someone will hear your name one day, not as a person, but as a principle. Because the bold don't leave echoes, they leave equations. Every action you've taken has carved a new path in time. And now, that path becomes a road for others. That's what it means to be the blueprint. You are no longer building alone. Your life has become the map for the next builder. So when you wonder if it was worth it, every tear, every night, every no, remember this. Someone will stand on your strength to see further than you could. And they will call that miracle you. You were never just building a dream. You were building a direction. The world needed your motion to remind it that change is still possible. And you delivered. No, you walk with quiet certainty. Not because you've arrived, but because you've aligned. Every step forward is faith multiplied. Every breath you take is a legacy unfolding. The blueprint doesn't need to be explained. It only needs to be lived. And when your time ends, you'll leave knowing this. You didn't just build something great. You became someone true. And truth, once lived, never dies. It passes through time, becoming law. Becoming light. That's the destiny of the bold. To become the blueprint itself. You've built, endured, and become. Now, the empire lives inside you. Because the bold don't wait for kingdoms to rise. They carry them wherever they go. The empire within. The journey began with motion. It ends with meaning. You thought you were building something outside yourself. But somewhere along the way, you realized the foundation was within. Every wall, every stone, every sacrifice was shaping you. And now, you stand not in front of your empire, but as it is. The bold don't wait for kingdoms to rise. They carry them in their spirit. Because empires built in silence can't be shaken by sound. You've become steady where others seek proof. You no longer chase peace. You are at peace. The empire within isn't made of gold. It's made of grit, of grace, of the parts of you that refuse to die. It's made of every moment you stayed, when walking away was easier. It's made of self-trust so deep, that even silence sounds like strength. You've built a home inside your own heart, brick by brick, truth by truth. No one can trespass there. No one can steal it. Because the empire within doesn't depend on applause, permission, or proof. It breathes quietly, and that's enough. The bold understand something sacred. What you build outside will one day fade, but what you build within becomes eternal. It's what you take with you when everything else falls away. It's the one kingdom that never crumbles, because it's rooted in truth. You no longer move for recognition. You move for resonance. You no longer chase timelines. You trust timing. Because the empire within runs on divine rhythm. Never rushed, never delayed. You've learned that strength isn't loud. It's the calm of someone who knows who they are. And that calm is the new currency of kings. Because those who rule themselves can never be ruled by the world. You're not seeking new beginnings anymore. You're mastering continuity. The empire within doesn't rise and fall. It expands. Every lesson adds a new chamber. Every failure becomes a floor. Every victory becomes a view. And when you stand there, looking out over what you've built, you'll notice something. You're not searching for the next mountain anymore. You've become the mountain. The climb was never to reach the top. It was to realize you were at the summit all along. You'll feel gratitude, not for the winds, but for the wait. Because the waiting taught you wisdom. The hardship taught you balance. And loneliness taught you self-respect. You wouldn't trade a single moment. Not one. Because everything you survived became the architecture of your peace. You've learned how to lead yourself. And that's the highest form of mastery. You no longer need to prove. You no longer need to explain. You just move. Like someone who finally knows their weight. So breathe. Not to start something new, but to continue what's already eternal. You've built something the world can't measure. An inner calm that doesn't shake. A focus that doesn't fade. A strength that doesn't scream. This is empire. Without walls. You don't need a crown to know your power. You carry it in your quiet conviction. Because real royalty is restraint. It's grace under weight. It's faith under pressure. And you've become both the architect and the throne. The world will see what you've built and call it success. But you'll smile. Because you know it's something deeper. They'll see results. You'll see roots. They'll see crowns. You'll see character. And that's how you'll know you've finally won. So let this be the quiet close, the deep exhale after a lifetime of effort. No more striving. No more chasing. Just being. You've become the proof, the presence, and the peace. The empire within is complete, not because it's finished, but because it's alive. The bold don't wait for kingdoms to rise. They build them within. And when the world finally wonders where your power came from, you'll simply smile and let your peace answer. If this message spoke to you, share it, subscribe, keep listening. This is Beyond the Noise Studio.